I refused to go to my brother's wedding because he didn't invite me to his engagement party. Now my family says I ruined everything and they're calling me selfish and petty. Was I really wrong to stand up for myself, or did my brother's snub justify me skipping the biggest day of his life? "Hey, you coming to the party tonight?" Mark, my co-worker, tossed the question over his shoulder as he packed up his laptop. I nodded, trying to sound more enthusiastic than I felt. Yeah, should be fun. But as I drove home through the drizzle, I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. It had been months since anyone in my family had mentioned the engagement party. The one that everyone but me had apparently known was a big deal. The one where I was apparently not welcome. My mind drifted back to the last time I'd seen my brother, Alex. We'd been playing video games, side by side on the couch, just like old times. I'd mentioned the party, assuming I'd be invited. He'd just shrugged, said it was going to be small, and that he'd let me know the details. But the details never came. Now, as the rain pattered against my windshield, I couldn't help but feel like I'd been erased from the guest list of his life. It was a strange, hollow feeling, like watching a movie of someone else's happiness. I'd always been the introverted one, the twin who liked to read and write code while Alex was out playing football and charming everyone. But we'd always had each other's backs, or so I thought. The silence from my phone was deafening as I pulled into my apartment complex. Not a single message, not even a thinking of you from anyone back home. It was like I didn't exist in their world anymore, like the invisible twin nobody talked about. Inside, I collapsed onto my couch, the weight of unanswered questions and unspoken tension pressing down on me. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the endless stream of happy faces on social media, my thumb hovering over my brother's profile. What had changed? What had I done wrong? The ache grew stronger with each passing minute, a dull throb that echoed in the emptiness of my living room. And as the evening stretched on, the realization hit me like a slap in the face. I was not going to be part of his big day, not in the way I'd always imagined. The next few weeks were a blur of work and loneliness. I threw myself into my job, burying myself in lines of code and deadlines. It was easier to ignore the pain that way. But every time someone asked me about the wedding or mentioned their own plans, it was like a knife twisting in my gut. "So, what are you wearing to the wedding?" a colleague had asked, her voice full of excitement. I'd forced a smile. "Oh, I don't think I'm going." Her face fell, the awkwardness thick as the silence that followed. "But you're the best man, right?" I'd shaken my head, feeling like a fraud. "No, it's just a small family thing. I'll probably just send a gift." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but it was easier than explaining the truth. The truth was, I hadn't been invited to my own brother's wedding. The twin bond that had been so strong, so unshakable, had crumbled without warning. I tried to call Alex, to talk to him man to man, but he never picked up. And when I talked to my parents, they danced around the subject, insisting it was all just a misunderstanding. But the evidence was clear. I was not welcome. The day of the wedding arrived with a heavy heart. I'd hoped for a last-minute change of heart, a text or a call begging me to come. But as the hours ticked by, it became painfully obvious that I was not a part of their celebration. As the wedding day drew closer, the tension grew thicker than the Portland fog. My girlfriend, Rachel, tried to comfort me, but she couldn't understand the depth of the betrayal I felt. "It's just a party," she'd say, stroking my back. "You're still his brother." But it was more than that. It was about being seen, being valued. And as I watched the minutes tick away on the clock, I realized I had a choice to make. I could let this fester, let it become a wedge that would only grow larger with time. Or I could face the music and confront them all. Rachel looked at me, her eyes filled with understanding. She knew me better than anyone, knew how much this hurt. "Do you want to talk to your parents?" she asked gently. I took a deep breath, nodded, and dialed their number. My mother picked up, her voice warm and cheerful, as if nothing was wrong. "Hello, sweetheart. Are you all packed?" The sound of her voice brought back a flood of memories, of us baking cookies together, of her comforting me when Alex and I had our childhood fights. But now, it felt like a knife twisting in my heart. "Mom, why wasn't I invited to the wedding?" I blurted out, unable to keep the anger from my voice. There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a sigh. "It's not about you, honey," she said softly. "It's just, well, we didn't think it was the right time." "The right time? For what? For me to feel like an outcast?" But before I could ask, she added, "You know how Alex's fiancée feels about you living so far away. She thinks you're too busy with your life here to make time for family." Her words stung like a slap. It wasn't about me, it was about Alex's girlfriend, now fiancée, dictating who was welcome in our family. I felt like I was 6 years old again, stuck in the middle of a squabble between siblings. The wedding day came and went without me. Rachel held my hand as we watched a movie, Her gentle touch a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. The house was quiet except for the hum of the TV. The absence of the celebratory sounds of a wedding stark in contrast to the joyous occasion my family was experiencing. My phone buzzed with notifications, each one a taunt. Congratulatory messages, photos of the happy couple, my own family posting group pictures with the caption "missing our other half." Rachel saw the pain in my eyes and gave my hand a squeeze. "You know you're not the problem, right?" I nodded, but the doubt lingered. Was it me? Had I done something to deserve this? The next week, I received a text from Alex. "Bro, we need to talk." It had been the first time he'd reached out since the snub. My heart raced as I read the message, hope flickering like a candle in the wind. We decided to meet at a coffee shop, neutral territory. He looked tired, his smile forced as he sat across from me. "Look, man, I'm sorry about the wedding. It was all just a mess." I leaned back, my arms folded. "Why, Alex? Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" He took a deep breath, his eyes searching mine. "Her family didn't want you there. They didn't think you'd fit in." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years of unspoken expectations and silent judgments. "What about you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do you think?" He paused, looking down at his hands. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't want to disappoint anyone. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. He'd chosen her over me, chosen the easy path of avoidance over the hard truth. The conversation ended with an awkward hug, the kind that feels more like two strangers bumping into each other than brothers reunited. As I drove home, the silence in the car was deafening. Rachel reached over and took my hand. "It's their loss," she said. I nodded, trying to believe it, but the pain of being cast aside, of being the unwelcome twin, lingered. I knew things would never be the same between us. The bond had been stretched too thin, the trust too frayed. As we pulled into the driveway, Rachel leaned over and kissed my cheek. "We're going to make new memories," she whispered, "ones that don't involve them." Her words echoed in my mind as I stepped out of the car and into the cold night air. The house was dark, but I knew she was right. I had to move on, to create a new life, one where family didn't mean being invisible. The following week, Rachel and I decided to throw a party of our own. A "We're Still Here" party, as she called it. We invited friends from college, co-workers, and even my old high school buddies. The house was filled with laughter and music, a stark contrast to the silence of the wedding night. In the midst of the party, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my sister. "We need to talk," it read. I sighed, feeling the weight of unresolved tension. Rachel saw the look on my face and gave me a nod of encouragement. I stepped out onto the porch, the cool breeze a stark reminder of the chill that had settled between us. She was standing there, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "You missed it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her, unsure of how to respond. "I know," I said finally, "but I'm here now." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she held her phone out to me. On the screen was a video of Alex's wedding speech. He talked about our childhood, about how we'd always had each other's backs. And then, with a sadness in his eyes, he said, "But life takes us on different paths, and I miss my brother." The lump in my throat grew, tears stinging my eyes. "What do you want, Liz?" I managed to ask. "I don't know," she said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "But I think we need to talk. All of us." I nodded, the anger slowly giving way to a dull ache. "Okay," I said, my voice tight. "Let's do it." The next day, Rachel and I sat in the living room with my parents and Alex. The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken words. We talked about the wedding, about the lies and the silence. And finally, we talked about the distance that had grown between us. It was a hard conversation, full of accusations and defensiveness. But as the night wore on, the walls began to crack. We talked about our feelings, about the expectations we had of each other that had gone unspoken for too long. And as the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, we reached an understanding. "I'm sorry," Alex said, his voice raw. "I didn't know how to handle it all." I looked at him, the anger giving way to sadness. "It's okay," I said, and meant it, "but we can't keep going like this." Our parents nodded, their own regrets etched on their faces. "We're family," my mom said, "and we need to work on that." In the months that followed, we did just that. We made an effort to stay in touch, to bridge the gap that had grown between us. Rachel and I even flew down to Arizona for Thanksgiving, the first time in 2 years. It was awkward at first, but as we sat around the dinner table, sharing stories and laughter, it felt like we were all taking the first tentative steps towards healing. The holidays came and went, and with each passing day, the wound grew a little less raw. I wasn't sure if our relationship would ever be the same, but I knew we were trying. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The story arc has been developed to show the gradual deterioration of the relationship between the protagonist and his twin brother Alex due to a misunderstanding over the engagement party and wedding. The emotional climax comes when the protagonist confronts his family about the snub and they have a heart-to-heart conversation, leading to an attempt at reconciliation. The story is left open-ended, with the suggestion that the family is making efforts to reconnect, but the full extent of their reconciliation is not yet known. The writing style is clean and direct, focusing on the protagonist's feelings and the dialogue between the characters to drive the narrative. Weeks turned into months, and our family dynamic began to shift. Calls grew more frequent, conversations less forced. We talked about the past, the good times, and the bad, and slowly, the hurt started to heal. Rachel was a rock, always there to remind me that family wasn't just blood, it was the people who truly cared. One evening, as Rachel and I were curled up on the couch, Alex's name popped up on my phone screen. "What's up?" I answered, bracing for another awkward conversation. "Hey, man," he said, his voice tentative. "I wanted to tell you something." "Sure," I replied, curiosity piqued. "I'm going to be a dad." The words hung in the air, heavy with joy and responsibility. I felt a smile tug at the corners of my mouth. "That's amazing, Alex. Congratulations." "Thanks," he said, relief flooding his voice. "We're having a baby shower in a couple of weeks. I'd really like it if you and Rachel could come." I looked at Rachel, her eyes sparkling with hope. "We'd love to," I said, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I meant it. The baby shower was a small affair, held in their backyard under a canopy of string lights. My parents hovered around the food table, beaming with grandparent pride, and Rachel chatted with my sister and her friends. Alex's wife, the woman who had once been a source of contention, approached me with a warm smile. "Thank you for coming," she said, her hand resting gently on her growing belly. I nodded, the past feeling like a distant memory. "It's important," I said, "for all of us." As we played games and shared stories, I couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in a long time. And as I held my newborn nephew for the first time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we could all find our way back to each other. The future was uncertain, but in that moment, with the soft coos of a new life in my arms, it felt like anything was possible. The months flew by in a flurry of diaper changes and midnight feedings. Rachel and I made the trip down to Arizona more often, eager to be a part of this new chapter in our lives. And with each visit, the distance between Alex and I grew smaller. We talked about fatherhood, about the fears and the joys that came with it. We talked about our own childhood, the memories we'd shared, and the ones we'd missed out on. One day, as we were watching the baby sleep, Alex looked at me and said, "You know, I never thanked you for being there for me." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "When I was planning the wedding, I was so stressed out. I didn't mean to hurt you, but I didn't know how to handle it all." He took a deep breath. "But you coming to the baby shower, that meant a lot." I nodded, understanding dawning. "It's okay, man. We all make mistakes." He leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know, I think that's what being a family is all about. Fucking up, but still showing up for each other." We both laughed, the sound echoing through the quiet house. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what had happened, no matter what the future held, we'd always be brothers. Time passed, and we grew into our new roles. Rachel and I talked about starting our own family, and the excitement grew with each passing day. And as we made plans for our future, I knew that my family back in Arizona would always have a place in our hearts. The next time Rachel and I flew back to Portland, I had a newfound appreciation for the life we'd built here. Sure, we'd faced our fair share of challenges, but we'd also built a community, a home filled with love and support. And as we drove back to our apartment, the lights of the city twinkling in the distance, I realized that sometimes, the ties that bind us aren't just the ones we're born with. They're the ones we forge ourselves, through love, through pain, and through the sheer will to keep moving forward.